What's up, guys? Micah here with Sobriety Podcast. We're here with our episode number 2. I have my co-host with us, Cristian.
What's up, y'all? We're finally here.
I know, we're finally here. Oh my goodness. How many months in the making has this
I feel like it's been a year. It's been a year.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time, and there's been a lot of times that we've scheduled this and, our daily life. So we're here to talk about Cristian's sobriety journey today, guys. As you guys know from episode 1, I'm an addict and alcoholic, so I've been through the recovery. Cristian's side of the story is a lot different. She is not an addict and alcoholic, but she has a crazy story. Very pure testimony. Her story is very truthful and has a lot of truth in it, and it's very powerful in my opinion. Cristian and I have been working together for a long time. She reached out to me a long time ago, and we've kind of hit it off ever since we started. We've kind of got some mutual connections with baseball and stuff like that, and so her side of the story with her sobriety is a lot different than mine, obviously, because she got sober through just regular sobriety, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about what was life before, what's life like now, why you got sober, everything like that. So let's just start it off with Cristian. Kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of who you are, really.
Yeah. Cristian Milstead. I am. Hold on. I'm 33. 33.
Okay.
I have 3 kids.
Okay.
My oldest is about to be 12. My daughter is 9, and then my youngest just turned 7.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So born and raised in Dripping Springs.
Awesome. Yeah.
Living the life.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's kick this thing off, man. Cristian, tell us. Again, this is your story, so obviously you can tell us anything that you want about it. First off, what was life like before sobriety? Really, I know my life was a lot different than it is now. A lot of ups and downs for me. I had some good moments. I had some bad moments. Really, let's start off with what was life like before sobriety?
So I think, just casually drinking. My family, they're big drinkers.
Okay.
So we would always have get-togethers, family get-togethers, have a glass of wine, 2, 3. And it was normal for me to have alcohol in the picture. It was just completely normal. And I think what a lot of people don't know is I was in the process of getting sober at the end of 2022. So I had a couple things happen in my life, which kind of it took a turn. It took a detour, yes.
Of course. Ups and downs.
Yes. So I was already thinking about that.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. For me, it kind of was the same thing. My life before sobriety was filled with ups and downs, and I think that's kind of like what leads us to that moment of our surrender moment. That moment. I'm done with this. This is controlling my life in so many different ways, and it kind of leads us into our next, the next question we want to ask is, why did you get sober? Well, I always say nobody wakes up one day and is like, I'm done and I want to get sober. There's always something that happens, or a continuous amount of events or feelings or emotions that happen that we're like, man, I'm done with it. So what really made you wake up one day and say, I want to quit, I'm done drinking, I'm done doing whatever it is, I want to get sober?
Right. So at the beginning of 2023, I kind of had a mutual friend, actually somebody that my family has known for a long time.
Okay.
And he reached out to me, and then, before you dinner or you hang out. Actually, dinner was the plan. That never really happened. It was just kind of hanging out, and one thing led to another, and things were not good.
Right.
I found out that I was pregnant.
Okay. Wow.
And it was something that really shook my world.
Of course.
And my family, and my family comes a little bit later, but it was just something that I had to navigate, and I was trying to do myself. And it was a situation where I was doing it legitimately by myself. I didn't have any support.
Wow.
I didn't have anyone to go to, because I was trying to navigate, being a mom, dealing with this, keeping it from my parents, doing all the things, and all the while I miscarried. And you and I had talked about this, and you know, it's not only are you, you know, you're pregnant, but
Right.
you're pregnant with twins. And this was, I think what a lot
Wow.
of people don't understand is that this was a long process.
Yeah,
it was a
of
long
course.
process. It was a painful process, and I think with all of that pain and everything that I had to go through,
Right.
my emotions with all of this, it got me into some trouble.
Okay.
And I didn't make a lot of wise choices.
Okay.
And I had to suffer consequences for those. It was really hard for me.
Yeah.
Even
Sounds like
talking about it is hard for me. And, you know, you and I have talked about this, and it's been something that I have solidly had to navigate over the course of 2.5 years now.
Wow.
So,
yeah, and I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, like you said, like that support system. I think in sobriety and out of sobriety, I think no matter what, a support system is so massive for people. You know, especially in today's world, we live in this world where, like, you know, especially me, like, I feel like asking for help is one of the things that I shouldn't have to do, because, you know, if I ask for help, like, I have to get vulnerable with somebody.
But, you know, I'm to the point now where I can talk about it, but it's just been...
That's great. That's a great place to be at.
Yeah, it's hard, and this is someone that, you know, you can't just run away from.
Right, you truly care for this person, right, of course. And, you know, and that's tough to go through whether you're drinking or not, you know, and so I think, you know, those traumatic events, you know, would definitely lead someone, addict, alcoholic, normal person, anybody to really go drink. And so what was kind of the one point where, you know, like one night where you realized that, like, man, I have a drinking problem, and you know, put the trauma aside, put, you know, everything aside, and you know, all of that, but like, what was the one night that you were just like, wow, like, I'm drinking a lot and I'm drinking by myself? You know, for me, it was, you know, one day, like, I'd always go to the bar on Monday through Friday, and, you know, I'd stay out till 2 a.m. or whatever it was, and you know, and I always hung out with a lot of people that drank like me, and so my justification was like, they're drinking like me, so I'm just like them, and there's quite a few of these guys around me, so it's like, you know, I'm not the only one, and that was kind of my justification. So what was that one night that you were just like, man, this is, you know, you're looking around like, this has got to stop, like, what is this?
It was actually a couple of days before my birthday.
Okay.
2023, a couple days before my birthday, and it was like my last attempt to reach this other person. I went to his house. Of course, he was home. He didn't answer the phone. I was blocked. And I remember I was going to go grab a bottle of wine. And what I would do is I'd pour a glass of wine and I'd go sit in my bathroom, kind of escape, you know, and I'd cry, and I'd do, but it was right after I got home from his house, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to numb my emotions. I'm not going to do that to myself anymore, because I have 3 kids who need me. Even my parents, at that point, my parents knew, and it was just like, I needed help.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that was the point. And I remember talking to my dad, and I'm gonna cry.
It's okay.
He had tears in his eyes, because this is someone that my family trusted. So first of all, they're trying to process all of that with the kids. You know, we went from, like, you know, we went through a really hard phase when my parents and I didn't get along at all. Because of essentially the betrayal. Why didn't you tell us? Why did we have to find out through, you know, Joe
there's
Blow?
There's that self-isolation.
Yes.
You know?
And so, of course, you know, when your parents find out, they want to know details.
Everything.
Know everything.
Yeah.
So that was very hard for me to do.
Of course.
But my dad was like, Christian, you need help. So what he did was he booked me with a therapist in Houston.
Nice.
And a good friend of his, I'm not going to say his name, but a really good friend of his, who actually works with a lot of professional athletes.
Wow, okay.
And so I would fly to Houston like once a week, back and forth. And, you know, it was really helpful. But I remember he was like, you know, Rainey, Christian, she needs to get diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, because we need to kind of, you know, narrow down exactly what's going on with her. Because
and that's so tough to hear. I mean, I can't imagine the emotions that you're already going through to be in that situation. You know, you're flying, you know, out of your city, that your realm, once a week, just to go talk to some stranger, right? Then all of a sudden they're saying like, well, we need to test you for this, and you know, and really hearing from, I know because I had a moment like that in my recovery journey where my mom told me, she was like, you need help. And like hearing that from your parents, like, you know, let alone just somebody that you know really cares for you, telling, you know, hearing from them, you need help. And it's kind of like that surrender moment of like, okay, I've thought of this before, you know, I've kind of questioned whether I need help or not. And then now I've got this person who knows me thick and thin, backwards, forwards, sideways, everything about me. You know, this person, especially my parents, like they brought me into this world, you know, like now they're telling me that I need help. And it's like, that's so much to process at one point, you know, and tell us more about that. Like, tell us about that moment of like when you're, this was like, you
I was ready because
okay.
I was having nightmares almost every night.
Okay.
You know, waking up my kids, I would just scream because you're reliving what you went
through. Of course,
through.
yeah.
I won't go into details, but to feel all of that pain, and my body just doesn't really respond to medications at all.
Okay.
It really doesn't, regardless of what it is. So it's, you know, closing your eyes and remembering all that pain that you had to go through.
Tough.
It is. You know, it's gotten a lot better now, but I've had a huge amount of therapy.
That's awesome. Man, I remember when I was growing up, you know, in middle school, I was going through some stuff with my biological father as well, and I went to a therapist at one point for a long time. Loved her to death, and she was amazing, and she helped me through so many things. At that time, we didn't really know that I was an addict or an alcoholic. You know, at the time, it was like, it was crazy. When I first walked into it, I was very timid. Knowing me, like, that's not normal. You know, I'm not a very timid person. And knowing you, like, you're not a very timid person either. You know, I think that's kind of why we hit it off so much. You know, we're very outgoing, which is great. And that's tough, man. That's tough to sit in a room, let alone with the strength. And reliving that, you know, and I think that's kind of a big thing that, you know, that's why we don't, you know, our coping mechanism was the bottle or whatever it was because it was easy. I didn't have to be vocal about it. I've learned that in my sobriety journey, like being vocal about my problems is super difficult, you know, like I can be vocal to myself or inside my head of like, dude, you know, this is stressing me out and this really bothers me, but you know, picking up that phone or just being verbal about it, like telling somebody like, you know, those 4 letters help, like that one little has so much impact, whether you're receiving it or whether you're giving it to somebody. But that's what I've learned too as well, is like it's so much easier to say that, you know, I need help because now we've been on the other side of it. You know, we've received the help and we know what it can do for us. So tell us about the help that you got from this therapist. You know, it sounds like she or he it sounds like he did a lot for you. And
he really did. And session after session, then you go to another doctor. It was a lot, but I'm better for it. So I don't go to him anymore.
Okay.
I go to someone in Dripping Springs.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing, you know?
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I know, and I just got done recently seeing a therapist for about 6 months too, and I remember our last session, he was like, all right, man, he was like, you know, if you need me, call me, and you know, me being the person I am, was like, well, I hope I don't have to call you.
Yeah.
You know, but like it's crazy, you know, I can't imagine the amount of time and the amount of effort that you went through to
it was hard and it was painful.
Of course.
You know, I'm so glad I did it. I used to be really against therapy, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't do therapy.
My therapy was the bar.
Yeah.
My therapy was the bar, you know?
I feel like everyone could benefit from some sort of therapy.
So what did life look like right after therapy? At this point in time in your life, are you sober at this time?
Yes.
Okay, cool, perfect. So what did life look like transitioning into that, going from not being sober to being sober? A lot of people don't understand that there's a physical change, there's a mental change, like there's all kinds of changes of just getting sober. I was talking to a friend of ours today, and you know, they just had a baby, and the husband, I guess, hasn't been drinking. And he was talking to his wife, and he was like, man, I feel a lot different. And his wife was like, it's because you haven't been drinking. And he was like, man,
way off your chest.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't understand. And I told him, I was like, dude, there's so many different things about us and about our life that changes drastically, but that change in its own is stressful, and it's hard to do that. So tell us about the transition from going to see that therapist in Houston and coming back to your regular life. Tell us more about that.
So I can tell you one thing, that I got really strong in my faith.
Okay, awesome.
I started going to church more, and
amazing.
Having 3 kids, it's like, okay, you got this, and you got this.
Correct.
You don't really have time to, a lot of time to yourself, and you know that, having
Correct.
kids.
Of course.
I had a lot of, when they go to sleep, though, that's my time to myself.
Definitely.
And I had a lot of time to grieve, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Everyone grieves differently, and I feel like when that happened to me, I wasn't able to grieve properly.
I was gonna say, do you think maybe like it was so, obviously it was stressful no matter what because of the situation, but do you think maybe it was so much more stressful because you didn't have time to really to grieve about it, and really when it popped out, I know grief would come in, it was more of like, okay, I don't have time to deal with this, so I'm going to push this to the side. And then when it came back later, it was 2 times as big. I always say my heart's like a trash can.
Yeah.
We can fill it up as much as possible, but
Yeah.
at some point we've got to empty it out, right? Because if we don't, it's going to overflow.
Sure.
So explain more about that, like the not having the time to grieve. What did that look like? How did that feel?
Well, I'll tell you what, as soon as I, drank a glass of wine, that's exactly what I was doing. So, not having alcohol in my life, thinking about it, processing it,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to just grieving. It's so different when you're sober.
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
so different, and it's
So
almost
different.
like, this is weird, but it's almost like a beautiful feeling to be able to grieve,
Normally,
Yes.
almost, yeah.
Yes.
Because I know when I was grieving in alcoholism and addiction, it was a different type of grief. Like it was almost like I wanted to grieve, and I would make every excuse up to grieve so that I had a reason to drink. Because then it would be like, wow, I feel like a mess right now, and I feel like a lot of stress. Well, the only thing that I know how to deal with my stress is this bottle or this Miller Lite or time to go to the bar, and yeah, that's wow, that's crazy. Yeah, grieving is so much different now, and honestly in sobriety, I find, I don't want to say that I find myself not grieving as much, but
sure. It's a different
I feel like it's not as apparent anymore, when I am grieving, and luckily I've been blessed to not have I've never really had a major traumatic event happen in my sobriety before, but there's been, life's been up and down, obviously, life is gonna life is what I like to say, so, grieving, so you come back from this therapist and you start integrating into the world, everything that he's told you to do, and you start realizing that you have time to grieve for yourself. What does that look like? When you do have time to grieve for yourself, how do you process that grief in that time?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that because this was, 2 days after, everything was said and done. I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and bought a pair of running shoes.
There it is. Okay.
But the thing is I ran too soon, and so
Gotcha.
I had a lot of issues.
Gotcha.
And the same doctors, they're like, you can't
do this.
No, you can't do it.
Okay.
And so I took a year off of running, which was not only messes with your emotions, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was grieving that, and I was grieving.
So running was more of like your meditation time. That was your time to yourself. That was your That's good to know, because that's like me. Like I'm not a runner. I don't like to run. But in the weight room, in the gym, in the weight room, there's something about throwing some plates on a bar and just trying to put my body through as much stress as possible that relaxes me. It's weird how
nobody understands it unless you're in it.
Exactly, and I think that's kind of that's the beauty of it, is like, everybody grieves in different ways and everybody copes in different ways, and I think everybody gets sober for different reasons and in many different ways. And so so you have to take a year off of running, and in that time that you had to take a year off of running, now you don't have a time to grieve by yourself. Now you don't have your main stressor. Did the obsession of alcohol or the thought of alcohol get greater in that? No? Okay, wow, awesome, that's great. What did that year look like? Now that you you don't have this one thing that you've been needing to use to de-stress and cope. And so what did you do instead of running to grieve?
Well, I kind of looked into, I'm actually working with Models USA.
Wow, okay.
So I started building
That's
my
news to
portfolio.
me. I didn't know that.
I started building my portfolio.
Okay.
You know, your physique, or they like the way that, you know, you look athletic and
right.
So that's kind of something that, you
wow,
know,
that's
I
awesome.
started.
Yeah, man, I had no idea about that. That's great. That's great for you. So as you go into that, you know, you get past that year and now you're able to start running again. I think that was kind of the moment that you and I reached out to me.
That is when things really started, like, okay, we got this. You know, it used to be really, like, you know, painful for me to even, like, you know, drive down the road and then you see someone that you really don't want to see, or you see, you know, but that was not hard for me anymore.
Okay.
You know, I wasn't pulling over crying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was easier, and that's when I knew, like, okay, I'm all right. And so
of course. Yeah, because I think, you know, I know when we first met, when I first started Sober Son, we met at Black Rock Coffee out here, you know, and I can't remember exactly how we met, but I know it was just kind of a coincidence of us just meeting, and I think we met up through Facebook or something like that. And
I think I commented on one of y'all's pictures of your Instagram.
Something like that, and we met, and I remember we just kind of hit it off, and I remember our phone calls in the morning. You know, I know there were a couple of them before, and I remember you going through a lot of traumatic stuff at that time. It just reminded me of, you know, me personally. You know, you were in a moment where you had people on your side, but they were very connected to the actual traumatic event, right? They were very deeply connected in that. And I know for me, like, there's some things that happen. Talk to them about that because they have one view of that event, you know. And so I think having that secondary support out of the primary support, I think that's great. So, you know, going back to your support system, I think at that time you were really trying to build up your support system, and
I had it from the other side as well.
Of course.
But, you know, I think it's like picking sides, right?
Yeah,
and you can talk to one person and then all of a sudden they're not going to talk to you anymore because of that person, and it just sucks. But I mean, I gained an army. I really did.
Definitely, and that's, you know, for me, that's kind of what sobriety's done for me as well. You know, it was of course before sobriety I had an army. You know, I had people that supported me, but with my actions through alcoholism and addiction, you know, I pushed that army away, and there were so many people in my life that I had cheated on, or I'd lied to, or I'd backstabbed, or whatever the case was. You know, they didn't want to deal with me, but from afar they still, you know, I had a buddy of mine time where, you know, he found out that I was lying to him, and he cut me off, and there was a period length of years that we went without talking to him. But then I found out through my mom that the whole time he'd been calling my mom and was checking on me the whole time. And it was moments like that it was like, wow, like,
I guess I didn't realize what my army was before.
Yeah,
people are,
of course.
You know, you're in this situation.
And that's a delusion, you know, there's the delusion of
Yeah.
alcoholism, you know, or you sit in this bottle, like you said, you know, you talk about going into a bathroom by yourself and just drinking and feeling like you're okay, and it's like, there's that delusion of, like, you know, and that was me, you know, I felt like there was nobody on my side, you know, and I felt like there was nobody on my side. I felt like my life was great when my life really wasn't great, because the people that I had really weren't on my side.
Well, it's those people that would say, I told you so. People.
Of course,
I told you not to do that. I told you, you know, and there were people even calling my parents when I was doing person. I didn't listen.
Yeah,
I didn't do. I mean, I just didn't listen because, of course, you know, you're protecting the person that you care about. So it's the I told you so people.
And the word that keeps popping up in my head is people pleasing. I feel like you and I are the same on people pleasing. Like, I know it's a big character defect of mine is I want everybody around me to be happy, no matter what, you know, but I've got to remember that they live their own life, and if they're not having a, you know, good day, like, that's on them, you know, like, that's their life. there's so many times where, you know, I get so messed up, and because I see somebody struggling in a room, or I know that they're struggling, I want to help them so bad, but they don't want the help. And like, I have to remember that, you know, I have to remember that's okay. And so, you know, as you transition into this, I remember when we first started talking, I think that was kind of right around the time that you were able to start running again.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about that a lot. I remember you would call me, and, you know, you would kind of be in a ask, you know, have you ran today? You know, or are you going running today? And I think that was kind of the time. So as you took the year off of running, reading looked a little bit different, but you got through it. When you were able to run again, how did that change things? Because I know it probably opened the door to multiple avenues of different life, avenues in life that you could have taken. So what did that look like once you found out that you could run again?
Well, I remember I had a doctor's appointment, and all my doctors were in there to see me. They wanted to see how I was doing. And sorry.
No, you're okay.
You know, I told them, I said, you know, I'm running.
Yeah.
And they were like, what?
Oh my gosh.
They were just so excited. And at the time, I was supposed to run the Austin Marathon.
Okay.
Well, that didn't happen because I got injured. So this is recent. But
and what was the injury?
I was in training for the Austin Marathon.
And what was the injury again?
I had a fractured ankle.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I was training for that way
That's devastating. Yeah.
But I did run the Fox 12.
Okay.
I mean, it's a beer place, but I'm
course.
like, there's a race.
Yeah.
I'm going.
I'm running. Yeah. Definitely.
So I had told them about that, and it was just like, it's opened so much for me.
That's amazing.
And I love running so much. Like, I geek out on it, but I love it so much. It's really helped me.
Do you think running is
process?
Obviously, do you think? I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but you know, do you think running has helped you stay sober?
Yes.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Cool. So as you start to run again, and you start to see this feeling of like, okay, I'm back. You know. Compare that to like what you felt like when you drank a bottle of wine. Because for me, it was like, you know, for me, when I felt that I could get back into the weight room, because I know when I was drinking and using again, like there was times where I would be so hungover or just so drunk or so high from the night before that I didn't go to the weight room. And I remember when I first got sober, or the second time around, when I actually got it right, like I actually started lifting and then working out like the way that I needed to work out. And I remember there was a moment in the weight room that I was like, man, this is it. Like, I'm back. This is who I'm supposed to be. And you know, as you start running, like, tell us more about that feeling that you get.
Kind of like this morning.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
It was a 20-miler. I did 20 miles this morning.
You ran 20 miles this morning?
Yes.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
It's like, because I'm on like a training program.
That's
insane.
So
my coach is like 20 miles. I'm like, oh shit.
Okay, sounds good. We're going.
And it's like you're running, and then it's like I'm not
free.
I'm free. I can just keep going.
Okay.
And so this guy right here keeps me
going
and tracks everything, and it's like, holy shit. I remember when I first started running back again.
Yeah.
It was like 2 miles. I'm like, I can't do this. I had issues with my legs, circulation issues. There were so many things that were connected to my trauma that I had to really, really fight through.
Okay.
But to feel that way right now, minus the fractured ankle, injuries
and
are going to happen when you're a long distance
It's
runner.
so crazy how grief can re-enter our lives in so many different ways. You know, especially for me, like, for me, they talk about the disease of addiction and alcoholism, right? They talk about that the disease is always waiting for me at any given moment.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's there. It's there every day.
Correct. I really compare that to my grief as well. You know, I've got things in my past that, you know, I'm not proud of, obviously, but, you know, there's moments in my life that, you know, like you were saying, like I'll pass by a house in my town that I had a crazy night at, and it was crazy because it was not a good night, and it was miserable the next morning, and I did a lot of things that night at that house that I don't want to talk about or that I can't even remember, you know? And it's like I passed by that. I used to, when we lived out here in Kyle, you know, I would pass by this one house every single day, every morning.
That's a black cloud.
Yeah, every morning, every night I would pass by it, and every time I passed by it, the disease of alcohol or addiction was almost like it was standing on the front porch that I could see when I drove by. It was almost like waving at me, like, hello.
That's how I feel, you know,
Okay.
if I see him or see someone who's associated with him, you know. It used to make me sad, but now, you know, I've had my fair share of, you know,
Definitely.
I've said what I needed to say, and
So when moments like that creep up, like when your grief kind of comes back into your life nowadays, like,
I could be running down the street and you
correct.
look up and you're like, oh, I didn't ask for that.
Yeah, like how does that look now? Because I know when, for me, like now, like when the obsession of alcoholism pops up, it gets me. Sometimes I'm like, man, I really want a beer right now. But it's not as predominant in my mind anymore because I know.
It sounds good, but you're like, not worth it.
Right, because we call it playing the take forward. Like, okay, what's it worth? What's going to happen if I go and have one beer? Well, who knows if I'm going to have one beer or not?
Yeah.
And so as we, as your grief comes back into play, like what does that look like now? Now you're in your daily life now. When your grief pops up, how do you, besides running? What if you're not running and grief pops up? What does your coping mechanism look like with that?
I just push through. I feel like I've been through so much pain, and you don't really know pain unless, really, your trauma pops up all the time.
Right.
It's all the time. It's all the time, and you can't get away from it. It's almost like.
I always say you don't know pain until you get sober. Honestly, like you really don't. Like for me, like I felt there was so much pain in my addiction to alcoholism that I pushed away for so long, and then I got sober and I had to deal with my pain, with my grief and my pain. The grief that I felt in addiction to alcoholism was worse in sobriety because I actually felt what it actually was supposed to feel like.
Yeah. And
I didn't have this one bottle or this whatever it was to drown it away. I had to deal with it. I had to face it. So now that you're sober, and now that you have this grief coming back, what does sobriety in your life look like today that was different than what it was 2 or 3 years ago?
I wouldn't have ever imagined my life would be what it is right now.
Wow, okay.
I'm super blessed. I have happy kids.
Yeah.
They're healthy. I'm happy. I'm healthy.
Yeah.
I don't need that validation anymore.
How has your relationship with your kids grown or changed since you got sober?
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Obviously, I'm sure it's grown deeper and greater. I know you pretty well. I know you're deep about your kids, which is great. Your kids come first. So it's like, what did your relationship before sobriety look like with your kids, and what is your relationship with your kids now?
Every day we're playing baseball. It doesn't matter if it's rain. Lightning's an exception, but we're always playing baseball. We're always doing something, and I love it.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I've always.
My daughter rides horses, so we're at work.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Do you know how to ride a horse?
Heck no.
Ridden a horse. I tell people all the time. I ridden a horse one time. It was actually in rehab.
She's so graceful, and she knows what she's doing, and she wants to go faster and faster. Pump the brakes.
A lot of people ask me a question sometimes as we grow up and our kids grow older, what's our response going to be of, Mommy, what were you like, back when I was so-and-so age or whatever. For me, that's a tough question. I've always kind of wondered whether I'm actually going to tell my kids whether or not this is what happened. But, I just wanted to see your opinion on that. Obviously you're being super vulnerable right now. So it's like,
I think, my oldest, he's very smart.
Okay.
He knows that I went through a period. And, my kids, they hear things, they've heard things.
Of course, right.
They saw me struggle.
Yeah,
they really did.
Definitely.
And, but they also saw
the bounce back. Yeah, exactly.
They're happy.
Of course, yeah,
than they were before because their mom's happy.
Yeah, great, awesome. So life now in sobriety obviously is 2 times greater than what it was 2 or 3 years ago. I can attest to that as well. If you had to change things in your life, everything about you, right? But there was 3 things in your life that you couldn't change, that you didn't have to change. What would those 3 things be?
Oh shit. Give me some suggestions.
Yeah, so
that's a lot of work.
For me, if there was 3 things in my life that
I could say things that I would change.
Okay, what are those?
With my parents,
okay.
I would have handled the situation probably a little bit better. Because I think that's what I regret the most, is not being honest with my parents.
So what does your relationship with your parents look like nowadays in sobriety?
It's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, my parents are my best friends. My dad and I were like, I'm like the female Randy Moss. And if you know my dad, he's like badass.
Of course.
But and it's interesting because I take that running gene from him. He was in the league runner. And so he gave me an article, gosh, it was a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Someone wrote about him.
Wow, that's amazing. Shout out to Randy, man.
Yeah. And my
awesome.
my mom and I struggled for a while.
What does that look like now?
Better, way
Awesome.
better.
That's
yes.
amazing. That's
you know,
amazing.
they had some certain, rules, I guess, if
Yeah.
you will. You're going to go do this, and you want to go and be, work for this company, and you
Mhm.
want to work. I'm also, work at
Right.
House of Jane.
Yeah.
That could be a little controversial
Of course.
in all of this,
Yeah, definitely.
but they said you want to go and you want to live your dreams and you want to do what you want to do. No one else is helping with those kids but us. I was like,
Amazing.
okay, that's great.
Yeah.
My parents are
Crazy.
super, super involved in my kids' lives.
That's amazing.
You'll always find my dad at the baseball field. You'll always
Yeah.
find my mom,
Yeah.
and it's really great.
Man, I'm sure I've met Randy before, but just don't
Big
know.
bearded man,
Yeah, I'm
braids,
sure I've met him
it's down
before.
here. It's crazy.
Well, that's amazing. Obviously your life nowadays is so much better, and I could say the same thing. Like my life has changed so much from sobriety to then addiction and alcohol. My relationship with my mother, my mom's always been there.
Yeah.
God bless her soul. I've put that lady through hell before,
Yes.
and she's been there since day one. But like it's when we get sober, it's I preach on the clarity that sobriety gives us. We're able to acknowledge different things at different points. We're able to have clarity around people, places, and things. Like there's so many people in my life today that I'm like, okay, I really like this person, but I probably don't need to be associated heavily with this person because of my sobriety. There's a lot of people out there. Some of my great mentors actually, guys that I used to coach with. I don't hang out with them anymore, but I call them all the time. Like, if anything in life goes wrong and I call my sponsor and he gives me advice and I still need to talk to somebody, I call them and I ask them but their lifestyle just can't fit the way that I am nowadays, and I don't know if you can find any similarity in that, but I know when I first got sober, a lot of people were like, when are you going to hang out with us anymore? And I had to tell them no. And that right there was just a change for me, like telling people no to hang out. Like that's not who I am.
We weren't at the bar anymore. It's because I haven't drank in 2 years.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. It's like, and I had to tell them, this isn't because of you. This is because of me. And I think that's such a huge upside of my sobriety. It's like I have found out who I am, what I am, what I can be. And I've really known my limits. Like I really know if I'm going into a situation where I'm like, this might be a dicey situation, and whether I have to, and granted there are some situations that I have to go into just because, but I don't go into those situations now all scared and tail tucked.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I have a backup plan. I have resources, the support system, have people in there, and I've always been keen on, when in AA, as we celebrate our milestones, they give us these little chips. We call them the Oscar chips. And they, when you get one, they always ask you, what's your name and how'd you do it? And I always say that I defend my sobriety and I hang out with people that defend my sobriety, right? For so long, like I hung out with people that were the same as me so that I could be the same as them, right? Nowadays, it's like, there are certain people, like I said, in my life that I'm like, dude, I can't hang out with you anymore. Like, I just can't, because I can't have what you have in my life. Yeah, and it's nothing.
Doesn't mean.
Correct, exactly. And I tell them all the time, man, like, look, just because I'm not hanging out with you, if you need help, please pick up the phone, call me, do whatever you need to do, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know if you can find any similarity in that, but I know there's so much more clarity in my life now of like, ooh, okay, probably shouldn't go into this situation if I don't have to, or there's things that I say, God bless my wife, there's some times where I, probably shouldn't open my mouth, and I do, and she kind of looks at me, and I'm like, you should not have said that one, but I'm able to acknowledge that. I'm able to also say like, hey, I was wrong. So in your life now, like, how can you be better in your life? How can, I think a lot of people think when we get sober, everything is just unicorns and rainbows, and life is going to be just like this, but in reality, like I said before,
it's life like anybody.
Life is gonna life. So what are some things in your life today that you know you probably could do better, and what are some things that like you probably could do better but you just can't do better at?
Well, right now,
okay, perfect.
I've been working on forgiveness for about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
You know, you can say you forgive someone, but do you with your actions, or do you really mean it?
Correct.
And I feel like there's been a couple incidences where like I'm like, I don't mean that because of what I just said or what happened. Strictly, you know, gravitated towards one person. That is what I'm working on.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
is there by chance any type of forgiveness for yourself? Because I know I had to forgive myself.
I did
a couple of times.
Yeah. You know, it took a lot for me to forgive myself.
Is there a moment where you realize, like, man, like I actually forgive myself for what I did? Like,
I was on the track, of course.
Okay, yeah,
I was watching my boys playing football, and my daughter was kicking the soccer ball. I remember running. I was like, "Mommy, tie my shoe," and you take those things for granted. Like, okay, tie your shoe. Let me finish my mile. Okay. Yeah. And I'm just watching my kids play, and I just thought, you know what, Christian, you have to forgive yourself.
That's amazing.
For certain things that you've done, and
yeah, you know, I think that's another great thing that I've learned in sobriety too. Is like, I don't have to tell people things if I don't want to. You know, like there's so many times where, especially the way that I am, is like, you know, I want to help everybody to have a chance to help me, right? But there's some times where I'm just like, no, like, you know, it goes back to clarity. Like, there's some times where I just can't be helped. You know, like this is part of life. Like life is gonna life, and like there's some times in life where I have to understand, like, okay, like this is God's plan, and like, you know, I think the way, you know, you talked about, you know, you found your faith a lot more. Like, I think that was huge. I keep going back to that in my mind. You know, my faith, I've always had faith. You know, I grew up Southern Baptist. We grew up in a church, right? My problem was never not believing in God, but I always believed that God was punishing me.
And you're angry, and I was angry with God for a while.
Right, exactly. And then I get sober and I look back on it, and it was like I was trying to play this head-to-head. It was almost like me being a baseball guy. It was almost like I was trying to strike out God who's swinging a bat at me, and it's like He's the Almighty. Sure. It never worked, you know, but and I would get so frustrated, but then I got so sober, and I'm like, dude, like there were moments that like I should not be sitting on this couch with you right now. Like God knows I should be dead in a ditch somewhere, but He's giving me, I don't want to say second chances, He's giving me like 8th and 9th chances before, you know, like my second chance was gone a long time ago, you know, and so it's like, you know, for me now, it's like I look at it as like, okay, instead of why is this happening, teaching me now, you know, what.
And you don't realize that until, you know, I feel like you have to go through the hardship, you know.
Grief. You have to go through grief.
And the ugly to realize, maybe that's what He was doing this whole time. That's what He was doing.
My mom has always told me, she's like, be careful what you pray for.
Yeah.
And I remember like there was a time, you know, actually like a few months ago, I felt like I was kind of stuck in life, you know, and I'd been praying for patience, you know, I was like, you know, Lord, give me patience to get through this moment in time, and life was great, there was nothing wrong, but I was just, you know, we were just stagnant, you know, and I remember somebody told me, they were like, dude, you know that's not what you do. And I go, what do you mean? Don't ask God for patience, because He's going to make you be patient, you know? And it was like, I was like, oh, but like just the, you know, just Him saying that to me, it was almost like God was speaking to me, you know, saying like, hey, like, I'm giving you patience right now. Be patient with me, see what's going to happen, and thing out. You know, and I can translate that back to my sobriety so many different times, going back to the moments, you know, where we have to go into events or situations where we don't want to go into, and it's tough, you know, but like in that time, it's like, as long as I just get through it, you know, and like you said, like you just push through it, right? Just push through it. Yeah, and it's obviously it's easier said than done, right? You know? But like if we haven't done the work around our grief or the work around ourselves, forgiving ourselves, like you just said, like I'm not gonna be able to push through it. And so I think you know, that forgiveness is such a huge, like, that's a big word, you know. Just
it was a big moment for sure.
That's a heavy, you know, that's heavy.
Well, I think because I was, you know, from, you know, my actions, I was blaming somebody else.
Of course.
You know, nobody's responsible for your actions but you.
Right.
That was something that I had to accept.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
then forgive myself for it.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, and I've had to forgive myself for a lot of things before, and I'm sure there's still some things out there that I haven't forgiven myself about that I'm still holding on to. But you know, I think that's part of life too. Is like as we go through life, we understand, like, okay, I need to forgive myself for this because this wasn't my fault, but I turned it into my fault. You know, I turned it into my problem. That's okay. You know, like I remember I used to think that I was this perfect human being, and you know, I was like I could do no wrong, and then I finally took a step back and I look at my circle, and I have nobody in my circle because everybody that was in my circle I've pushed away, you know, and there's the forgiveness part, you know. And I remember when I got sober, like, you know, in AA they make you do amends, like I have to go make I shouldn't say have to, I get to, you know, I get to go make amends to people that I've wronged before, and there were so many times in my amends that I was like, man, this person's not going to forgive me. Like, I just know it. That's
their problem.
Correct. Well, and 9 times out of 10, they would. They would forgive myself. And 9 times out of 10, it was like, dude, I've got to forgive myself for not forgiving you earlier, you know? And it was like, and you know, and going back to my buddy who had been checking up on me for the whole time, like, I made amends to him at one point, and I remember telling him, like, dude, I've lied to you, I've gone behind your back. How can I make this up to you? What can I do? And he was like, Mikey, he was like, I forgive you. And he's like, I just haven't forgiven myself for not reaching out to you more, you know? And it was like a moment that we were just kind of like, whoa, we really didn't know, you know, didn't know what was going on. That was a big moment in my sobriety. That was kind of one of your, you know, your daughter asked you to tie your shoe moments. That was really when everything started clicking. I was like, wow, this stuff is for real. Like, my life is so much better. I'm at the point now where, like, I'm making relationships with people that I burned a bridge down with, you know? And like you said, too, there's some people out there that, you know, I've reached out to make amends to before of like, hey, can I make amends? And they don't answer me. And it's like, I have to be okay with that.
And that's where I mean, you can't force people to to reciprocate the same feelings that you're feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
You just gotta let it go.
Definitely, yeah. Well, wow, that was a lot, Cristian.
I know.
Thanks for being
you know, and it's been a journey.
Yeah,
but
of course.
I'm happy.
Definitely.
And it's just, it is what it is. Yeah. You know, with the whole situation, I got this tattoo right here, you know, to remind myself of, you know.
What does it say?
It's July 13th.
Okay.
And then I have my kids right here.
Of course.
And you know, you look at that and you don't think about, you know, how poorly you were treated, or why weren't they there for me, or why didn't they, you know, you don't think about that.
Yeah.
You think about yourself and how strong you are and what you got through. Right. And I mean, this is everything on one arm.
Yeah.
So. Definitely.
Well, Cristian, thanks for coming today. Again, this is Sober Identity, episode 2. From here on out, we're going to try and have as many guests on here as possible to tell their experience, strength, and hope. Again, go check out shopsobersun.com. Got all kinds of sober merchandise on there, all kinds of stuff.
Get yourself a hat.
Yes, get yourself a hat. All proceeds go to local facilities, rehab facilities in this area. We're trying to just give back to those guys. You know? That's what we're here for. We're here to spread experience, strength, and hope, as Cristian did today. Powerful story, Cristian. Thank you again. Thanks for being honest. I know that took a lot, and I know that we've been trying to get to this point for a long time. And
we're done with it.
Yeah,
no, it's crazy.
It's unbelievable. You know, you've done a lot of work around yourself. I'm super proud of you. It takes a lot for somebody to come on a platform like this and share that stuff with you, with us. And you know, like I said in my last podcast, it was after doing something like this, 10 times out of 10, I always have the moments after this, like the rest of my day is just going to be filled with gratitude. Yeah. You know, it just because sharing my experience, strength, and hope, hearing somebody else share their experience, strength, and hope. Hopefully there's somebody out there listening to this that's going to latch onto this story and be like, wow, like that's a strong woman, that's a strong man, like their story is amazing, and you know, and that's what we're here for. We're here to give those people and let them know that you're not alone. You know, addict's an alcoholic on my side, non-addict's an alcoholic on her side, but you know, we still can get sober, we still go through everything, everybody goes through trauma, everybody goes through misery, and you're not alone in this world, and we're here to help, and you know, you have a support system, and
100%.
and so, but like I said, we're gonna bring some other guests on here, some really cool guests. I've got some planned, you know, and Cristian will join us as well, and we'll ask them a bunch of questions, and I'm excited to see their story. You know, we've got some in the pipeline already that are some amazing stories. There's some out there that I'm a little nervous to talk to.
Yeah.
There's a couple people that have a really, really great story that I'm like, ooh, that's gonna be a tough one.
We appreciate the vulnerability. You know, us coming on and telling our story, even though, you know, maybe I didn't share everything. It's like, I don't need to share every single detail. It's, you know, just a little bit of your story.
Definitely,
and
you know.
it means a lot.
As long as we understand, you know, where you were, how you got sober,
Yeah.
what life is like now, I think those are the 3 contact points that, like, you know, for me, like, life before sobriety was a lot different than what life is now, and I wouldn't have this life if I didn't have a moment that told me that I needed to get sober, you know. You know, I remind myself of those questions all the time. It's like, okay, my life looks like this nowadays. My life looks like this because I did this, and what did my life look like before this? You know, remind myself of those, remind myself of gratitude, and remember what was there. So, Cristian, do you have anything else to say that you want to get off your chest? Or
No, I think I'm good. I think that was a lot.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
know, it's a lot. But
for sure, definitely.
thank y'all for listening. We appreciate you.
Of course, guys. And again, go check out our YouTube channel. We have an Instagram as well, and our website. All of that stuff's on there. ShopSoberSun.com. Again, this is podcast number 2, episode number 2, Sober Identity.
Number 2.
Here we go.